are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Good.
I'm good. How are you?
I'm hanging in there.
I is sucking your soul, apparently.
It has been a long couple of days. So her molars, all three of her molars are coming in. One is already in. And I think that's the biggest issue.
I was going to ask, what is keeping her from, like, what is she possessed by the demon?
I feel like she is. I'm not sure what to do because, like, she's happy 1 second and then the next it's like, rah. I mean, I was at Costco today and she would not let me put her down. Like, she wouldn't sit in the cart. She wouldn't walk with me. Mama. Like, she had to hold me. She was thrashing around, screaming bloody murder. And then some nice woman came up to me in the middle of the tantrum as I'm just letting her, tantrum it out. And she put her hand on my shoulder and was like, "You're doing good, Mama. You're doing a great job. It gets better." And I was just like, "Thank you."
Solidarity.
I was like, "Thank you." Normally I'd be like,
random woman in Costco, because holy shit, right?
Right. And she's like, "You're doing," and she's like, "I have 3 daughters. You're doing great." I was like, "Thank you." I'm like, tears forming in my eyes. I'm just so tired. So that was my day.
So that was your day.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, because she's been out of control, like the
Yeah.
last couple days, right? So you said her molars are coming in.
Yeah. So finally I decided, I did all the tricks. I mean, I tried to do all the tricks. And then finally I gave her Tylenol. I was like, well, let's see if this happens. If this works.
And it worked?
So, well, she's calm. Yeah. So I did put her down and she cried for like 10 minutes, which is still way longer than she normally cries. She'll usually cry for like 30 seconds and be out. So, but now she's asleep. So we'll see if it lasts. But
yeah, right when that Tylenol wears off. But if she's in that much pain, then she's going to be acting out, but she's also not going to be sleeping. She's not going to be napping. That's going to affect everything,
of course.
And so,
of course.
Her 2-year-old. Well, she's 2. Her 2-year-old molars, right on schedule.
Exactly. And she had her dentist appointment last week, so he was like, "Yep, they're coming in."
Oh well, there you go. She's letting you know about it, Mama. I was going to say, like, I don't know. My mom used to always say, and I think this is true, is whoever called them the terrible twos never had a 3-year-old. So I don't know if you want me to say that.
Everyone already told me 3 is worse.
So
yeah, it's fine.
Maybe you should have her little friend in the corner that lives in the corner of her room. Like, watch her, talk some sense into her.
That's another thing too. So she's terrified of the dark all of a sudden, like out of nowhere. "Mama, lights on. Mama, lights on." That's what she says all the time now. She screams. Yeah. So it is what it is. We say our prayers and give her good vibes and juju. And
I need to give that girl some crystals.
Yeah.
Not the kind she can eat, though.
Right.
She needs she should take the bigger ones.
Right.
I'll just see if I have any that need to be passed along to her. And you guys need to come over.
I know. Yes.
But anyway.
Yeah.
I'm good. I feel like we haven't talked in forever, which is like, usually we don't talk a lot on the weekends, which is funny because the weekends, but you're always working, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like whenever we meet up on a Monday to record, which is when we're doing this, I always feel like it's like playing catch up with you. It's like, oh my God, I haven't talked to you in so long.
Same shit, different day, Katrina.
But I feel like it's been longer this time. I feel like it's been like
yeah. And we've been wanting to record this episode for a while, but things just keep happening.
It's finally happening. How many times have we set this to record? But we're getting it done now. And I actually was, we talked about it. We're like, okay, we're going to do it tonight. So I'm like, I was driving home from my AA meeting and I was like, wait, which episode was this? What are we, which, because we're doing Unsolved Mysteries. And I was like, wait, which one was this? And I know I watched it last week because we were going to record it last week. And I was like, I couldn't even remember anything about it. And I'm like, okay, well, I had some time. So I came home and I like put it back on. I was like, oh yeah, the body in the bay. First we had the body in the bags. Now we have the body in the bay.
Right. And I will say that I think out of all the episodes we've seen so far, this one to me is the most mysterious, if not, well, one of the most mysterious, because the evidence is just like, in the other episodes, it was kind of like, okay, yeah, one way or the other. But I mean, I'm pretty
Really?
much
I thought it was like you can only be left with one conclusion.
well, oh yeah, well, me too. But I feel like there's just so much to this, and
that's so funny.
yeah.
I don't know. It's like I was like watching this. I put it back on, and they're like, Bradenton, Florida. And I was like, oh yeah, it's fucking Florida. That's right. All right.
Yep.
So let's get into it. Body in the Bay. Tell me about it. I am excited to see what other research and what other you have on this, because I did not do any outside research on this.
Well, I got a little bit of things, but I mean, there's so many open-ended conclusions that people are drawing. So I think at the end result people think is one thing, but then it's kind of like, how do you get there? You know?
Right. Okay.
So yeah, we're talking about episode 7, volume 3, Unsolved Mysteries, Body in the Bay. And the story takes place in Bradenton, Florida. And it's about Patrick Mullins, whose body was found floating in 4 feet of water in Emerson Point, Florida. So what happened was on Sunday, January 27th, 2013, Pat's wife, Jill, was going to her sister's house in Sarasota, Florida. She said that she wished Pat a good day, and he gave her a kiss, and she left. That evening, she arrived back home around like 6:37, and Pat wasn't there, but his truck was there. So she called his cell phone, and no one answered, but that was pretty typical of him. He did not carry his cell phone around all the time. So she thought maybe he was at a neighbor's house, but decided to walk down to where his stump knocker boat was.
I love that name.
I know, stump knocker. And realized
I guess it's a particular style of boat, like not that boat's name or anything. It's just yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, I had never heard of it. I mean, I don't live in Florida, or I mean, I live in Annapolis near the water, but I've never heard of a stump knocker. So it is a flat bottom boat, and it's used in very, very shallow waters. So his was like a 14-foot stump knocker, and he liked to ride it around in the Braden River. And as his family would later say, that he pretty much stayed in the river. It's not meant to go in anything very deep. Yeah.
Like, so they live on this river, right? So like the house backs up to the river, and so he had this like thing that you're driving around. Like, was he fisherman? I don't know if you can fish in those. I don't know what
you fish.
But I feel like it's just stump knocker.
Yeah.
Intended for shallow waters. He's not going to go out to the bay or to the ocean.
Yeah, I wonder if they have them in Louisiana too, but didn't really look into the stump knocker too much, but I thought that was pretty interesting. But so yeah, eventually he didn't come home. So his wife decided to call their son Miles. And Miles thought, hey, something's not right. So he was in school in Tampa and decided to come home. And she also called Pat's brother to help search for him. So Miles and Pat's brother are out in the water in, I guess, Miles's boat, trying to search for Pat. They stayed pretty much in the Braden River and didn't go to another river, which is the Manatee River, because they thought, hey, he wouldn't go there. It was deeper, and he just never went there. He would stay
at this point. They think he's just out late, right? They don't not necessarily thinking he's missing, but
and also they said that he was very smart about boats. I mean, he knew if it was a mechanical error, he would know how to fix it.
Yeah.
So they're thinking maybe he just had a mechanical error or whatnot, that nothing bad would have happened.
And he's just
Eventually, though, Jill did decide to call the police when he didn't return. And of course, like police do, they interrogated her, asking about their relationship.
Of course.
Right. How was it? Oh, wait, we get that, right? We've watched enough crime documentaries to know. And then they asked her if they owned any weapons, which she said, no, they don't have any guns, which I think is important later on, you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Not only did he not have any guns, he was completely just not interested in guns, which is a little surprising in Florida. I feel like,
if for a guy who's into like being on the water, boats and stuff, like I feel like having guns is like goes hand in hand with that. But not all Floridians at me. Come on, because fuck y'all, you're Florida.
That's where I want to move, right? That's neither here nor there. So
Manatee River.
No, not there. St. Augustine, but other side
I
of
used to
Florida.
live in St. Augustine.
I didn't know that.
Have we not talked about that? Wait, okay. Oh God.
We
Okay. Yeah, I
probably
lived
did.
in St. Augustine at World Golf Village,
Oh,
right when it
very
was
nice.
built. Yeah, it had just been built. There was like nothing around there, right along the St. Johns River.
Oh,
Anyway,
very pretty.
yeah, it was
Nice.
nice.
So yeah, they should call police, and they decided to start searching for a lost boater. They said that he was last seen leaving in his boat around 3 p.m. that day. I'm not sure who saw him leave at 3 p.m., but that's
I thought it was like a neighbor or
okay.
somebody, had
Yeah.
seen the way they showed the pictures and stuff. Like if somebody else was out putzing about in the yard or on the docks or whatever, they might have seen him. So, just see him putzing out in his little knob dicker or whatever the hell it's called.
So I will stump knocker,
The fart knocker.
stub. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Eventually,
this is my MS brain working, by the way.
Eventually, the Coast Guard was called in, and they mentioned they weren't sure what exactly they were looking for. Were they looking for, a person just by themselves floating in the water, or like a rescue mission,
or a boat, or a
right,
capsized boat, or like what are they? Yeah,
exactly. So they were searching, and they didn't find anything. Again,
Not
maybe
then they didn't.
right. The family was also saying, well, maybe he had a medical emergency.
Right.
But on January 28th, the next day, the boat was found past Egmont Key, which is a shipping channel. And it's not at all where he was supposed to be. It was like really far from his house. And where the story starts getting weird and strange is that all of his belongings were on the boat, except for the anchor to the boat. And when they found the boat, they noticed it was out of gas and the engine was set to idle, but there were no obvious signs of injury. So in looking at the boat, there was no blood. There was no signs of struggle. I mean, it just looked.
That's the part that I find weird,
right?
Is that based on everything, which we'll get to, but the fact that no trace evidence was found in the boat.
That was my biggest, well, we'll get to it later, but yeah, I agree. I totally agree. Because the evidence doesn't lie. Well, most of the time, right? So
yeah, but there's human error involved in whether they swabbed it properly or how long the boat had been out there. Did they luminol it?
Exactly.
What techniques? We hear their conclusion that there was no trace evidence found. But what we don't hear is any backstory to that. And we watch enough true crime to know that there's always
people screw up, right?
There's always possibility for human error. So
anyway, or in some cases, unless there's a connection between the police and something greater going on,
right? Which I don't think was the case here. I mean,
we'll get into that.
Okay,
I don't know. Yeah, there's something else I found. So, anyways, the police decide to look into Pat. Okay, so they're looking at his financial records. Just what kind of person is he? He literally is like the definition of a good guy. It seems like he's in a happy marriage. Him and his wife do not have any financial troubles. He's
just that guy. He's like that, almost like an old hippie, guy that's going to be like, like everybody knows this guy, right? There's this guy that's like in everybody's neighborhood. It's just the agreeable older guy. What apparently he worked at a school, he was
a teacher for 20 years before becoming a librarian, and everyone loved him.
Yeah, and he probably would play like Grateful Dead and shit like that in the backyard while he's tinkering on his outboard motors that he's fixing for the neighbors. Hey Joey, how you doing?
Exactly.
I don't know why I just gave him a Minnesota accent, but
well,
anyway.
So the boat was then released back to the family when they couldn't find any evidence on it. So of course the family's going to look at the boat themselves, and their son Miles said, hey, there's some light red paint markings on the side that weren't there in the past. So which will actually come into play later on. Yeah.
And then funny that it's red, because I think that whole thing is a red herring, but whatever.
Yeah. There you go. And then they kind of talk a little bit more about his history of Pat, which we kind of just went over. He was a librarian, well respected. They then start to interview the Coast Guard, and they said that they used the reverse drift method to figure out the vessel probability drifting.
Well, yeah, when they said that, I was like, yeah, I'm really glad that that's the method that they used there, Jimmy.
Right. I was like, I have no idea what this means.
Yeah,
I mean, I get what you're saying, but
I mean, thanks, I guess, for explaining.
When you have to start using math and like putting in calculations for distance.
I mean, I get that he's kind of like, he's giving a foundation to what he's saying, using this particular method. He doesn't need to explain the nuances of the method, but just, hey, using this method, we were anticipating we would find it in this area, or to be, whatever. How did it get here? Where did it come from? Yeah. They have to, which makes sense, because if you have to reverse the drift, where would it have driven?
Right.
I mean, drifted.
Drifted.
So they were trying to find the point at which it started the drift.
So then we get to meet this interesting character named William Page, who was a fisherman.
Oh yeah.
Which I actually,
body. Yeah, he's that guy.
Well, he actually, in another article I read, said that was the third body I think he found that year or something crazy. Or it was January, but within a year. And so I was
just fucking Florida, man.
I know, right? It was just like, my God.
It's fucking Florida.
Yeah.
That's why this guy's dead.
Yeah. And he said that he saw the body floating, and it was 7 days after the boat was discovered. And he noticed it was wrapped, with a rope. The hands looked clean. A wristwatch was on. He noticed the entire body was attached. The rope was wrapped on the body, but the rope was attached to an anchor that was at the bottom of the bay. He said his face looked like spaghetti, which was very kind of off-putting, actually, for him to describe the body like that. But he also said that he was fully clothed except for one shoe. And he knew not to touch the body at all.
Oh, because he's apparently,
that was, I think, the third body.
Dead bodies is what he fishes for. Said he did say he was a commercial fisherman, so maybe he does this and he goes and he fishes for dead bodies and then leverages that for like paparazzi money or stories or interviews.
Yeah, maybe
living.
Yeah,
commercial. There you go.
And he noticed in the face that the skull cheeks and most of his face was gone. So he even mentioned he thought that it was like a gunshot wound to the face of the police, which then they later actually said that it was
a shotgun to the face. Buckshot. So standard 12 gauge buckshot, apparently.
Right. And the medical examiner then was interviewed, and he was saying that there was severe head trauma with 6 separate perforations on the left side of the skull and 1 large perforation on the right side. So he said it was an obvious gunshot wound.
Entry and exit wounds, yeah.
But he did not know if it was suicide or homicide.
Right.
So the manner on the death certificate is unknown, which is good because I feel like in a lot of cases we see I don't know why the medical examiners are so quick to put whether suicide. It be just suicide, and then it kind of closes the case and the families are left, hey.
They have to prove it, and it's a lot more higher burden of proof, right?
Yeah. So he put unknown.
Yeah. But then the press guy later was saying, oh yeah, they decided it was suicide before they even finished pulling him out of the water. I'm like, no, they didn't even put suicide on the death certificate. Like it could be a suicide, and there are reasons why. And the medical examiner's words were, we cannot rule out a suicide. And I think it was more likely than not one thing or the other or anything like that.
Right.
It just said he couldn't rule it out. So
I think too, it was the way the detectives were treating Jill. Kind of like, shut up, this is a suicide kind of thing. Like, you don't know what you're talking about, which we'll later talk about. But I think also noticing that the hands weren't tied down with the rope.
Right.
That was one of the red flags. Was like, well, obviously he used his hands to shoot the gun, which doesn't make any sense because how are you supposed to tie your own hands, 2 of them down?
Well, so this is where I have a problem with how it's portrayed, is because we don't know what the sheriff's people actually said to her, right? They could have been speaking in a way that's just relating the facts, saying it could be this because of this, X, Y, and Z, And she is then interpreting it her own way as saying they were trying to push suicide on me. We don't know that they actually did that. We're getting her analysis, her interpretation of that, or the conclusion that she is drawing is that they were pushing that. But if they just gave her the facts, like the medical examiner guy gave us, like that he couldn't, rule it out, they wouldn't be pushing it necessarily. Because it's conceivable because cops, we've seen this a million times where they really just don't want to investigate it for one reason or the other, and they just want to do that.
Well, so
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, it was like, so one of the things the detectives told her was to, quote, be reasonable, because if it was a murder, they would have taken his wallet.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's $8 found in his wallet. And the detective also said his hands would have been tied if it was a murder. And Jill said, no, they probably killed him before they tied him down and anchored him in the water. So that was the one thing, the two things.
Yeah. Well, again, we have Jill recounting what the sheriff told her, which is colored by her own interpretation of what he said, not what he actually said. It's in legal world what we would call hearsay.
Yeah. I have size 18 font, so now I have like 10 pages of notes.
Did you know that 30 million women are impacted by weakened or thinning hair? If you're among them, know that you're not alone and that there is a solution that you can trust to deliver results. Millions of Americans experience thinning hair. It's more than common. It's actually normal, but it's not openly talked about, especially among us women. Going through it can feel lonely and frustrating, but it's time to change that conversation and join the thousands of women who are already standing up for their strands with Nutrafol. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement, clinically shown to improve your hair growth, thickness, and visible scalp coverage. Nutrafol supports healthy hair growth from within by targeting the 5 root causes of thinning: stress, hormones, environment, nutrition, and metabolism through whole body health. Nutrafol has 3 unique formulas to support women through all stages of life, including postpartum and menopause. Each formula is physician formulated using natural, drug-free, medical-grade ingredients in consistently effective dosages so you get the most reliable results. In a clinical study, 86% of women reported improved hair growth after 6 months. Over 3,000 top doctors and stylists have recommended Nutrafol as an effective and high-quality solution for healthier hair. You can grow thicker, healthier hair and support our show by going to Nutrafol.com and entering the promo code FRAUD to save $15 off your first month's subscription. This is their best offer anywhere, and it's only available to U.S. customers for a limited time. Plus free shipping on every order. Get $15 off at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code FRAUD. I mean, those are things to consider. Those are definitely things to consider. So his hands weren't tied. So he could shoot himself, conceivably wrapped the anchor around and stuff, like the rope with the anchor, wrapped it around. I don't know how you throw the anchor first. Wouldn't that pull him over? And then
they said it was only like, depending on the depth of the water, it could have been like 4 feet to 6 feet. So it may not have pulled him all the way down. It may, like they demonstrated at the end with the random guy on the boat, kind of just throwing the anchor in. And people online were making the point of, because people online were saying, hey, just because the anchor was thrown over doesn't mean that that's where he was killed or shot himself.
Right.
That it could have definitely dragged. Right. Exactly.
Dragged and drifted. And exactly. It could have been at any point. We don't know. Did they do their reverse Tokyo drift thing on the body?
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, how often, like how what would you measure that? All the other times we've had guys in the water with anchors tied around them, they've drifted from X point to X point. So we can, based on those calculations, like, no, you're not going to have that. You just have to make your best estimates, I guess. But absolutely, it didn't have to be right there.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, he's wrapped. So he's got the rope wrapped around him, and they throw the anchor and then shoot.
Right. Well, let's talk about the gun. So there were no guns in the house. He didn't own a
Right.
shotgun, like we mentioned. He wasn't interested in guns. And the police decided to go through all of his like transactions, banking. They couldn't find any evidence that he bought a gun. Now, that's not to say that he couldn't have just paid cash and bought it from whatever,
Or
whoever in Florida or
a
whatever.
friend or something. But yeah, I don't think it matters because I don't think
Right.
anything on the suicide shows like I don't think it's suicide at all.
Yeah, neither do I. So there was no suicide note, and there was no reason they could find for him to take his own life. He even bought welding goggles that he wanted to use later on. He was about to celebrate his 30th anniversary, retire. He was so excited for all the things that were going on in his life.
Right.
There was just no signs of any sort of
There's
reason for him
nothing to
take his life.
indicate that he could have, that he would have bought a gun, that he had any indication of any kind of that this would have been foreseeable in retrospect.
Then they talked to Miles, and Miles made the comment about the way the rope was tied.
Oh, God.
Right. He said, my dad wouldn't have tied the rope like that. Like, he knew how to one knot and it would have been on him in a certain way. I don't know what knot that would be. And to wrap the whole, I mean, I used to be a firefighter and we would learn certain knots and everything.
Mm-hmm.
So you get really comfortable with doing your own knots a certain way. It's just what you do. So I can see why he was saying, why would he do this certain
but
thing
just because you don't understand why not that I think anything in the suicide theory holds water, but this particular piece of evidence I don't think is evidence, right? Like just because the son wouldn't have any why would he when he knows all these other ones that would have been so much easier? Well, yeah, but he could have any number of reasons if this had been a suicide, but I don't think it's even necessary to go down this path because nothing else, you need all these other things to be true to also
I didn't know
make
if they actually mentioned what kind of knot and knots were used, because
like the pictures,
right? But I'm saying, like, if it was, and I didn't see like the back of them. I didn't really look that hard at the evidence, but I feel like if it was something that he had never done before, then that would be kind of a red flag. But if it was something that he did, maybe.
I mean, it looked like
if it was an
I didn't look at it a long time, but I did used to be a sailor. I used to race on the San Diego State sailing team. I used to teach sailing. And so back in the day, I mean, your ropes and your knots, and you use them for very specific things, right? But what kind of knot is there for wrapping an anchor around you and like that?
Yeah.
To say that he wouldn't have used a knot like that. Well, you have to also assume that he wouldn't have killed himself. He all of these other things too. It's just that whole line I think is just stupid. So I didn't even bother in my head analysis to go down that particular branch very far, because nothing else in the suicide theory makes sense, because it would all have to line up. All these multitude of things would have had to happen, and I'm like, Occam's razor, simplest explanation.
Yeah, there's just no way.
Yeah.
So then the family,
I didn't look too hard at the knots because I don't think it mattered. Ultimately, if they look professional, what kind of knot it doesn't matter, because I don't think that it's determinative of what the outcome is.
Yeah. So after all this, and the detectives then saying, quote, to Jill, be reasonable or whatever, that's when the family decides to hire a forensic expert, Dr. Lori Baker. And she said that in her career, she has never seen a suicide case like this. So she decided to kind of reconstruct it with a grown male adults in the boat who was probably around the same build and weight, looked like, as Pat was. And they tried to literally reconstruct what would have happened. He did the same exact kind of ropes wrapped around him, not everything. They had the 25-pound anchor. And he threw the anchor in. He looked very uncomfortable, by the way. Threw the anchor in, and he was kind of like wobbling, it looked like, on the side of the boat as he was trying to hold an 18-inch barrel shotgun far away from his face, because they said that there was no contact from the barrel.
Yeah, there would have been a contact wound, which you almost universally see in suicide by gun.
Yeah. So he would have had to hold the gun very far away, and it would have been an awkward angle to even,
because it's an 18-inch shotgun.
Right.
Yeah.
So Dr. Baker said that the shotgun most likely would have remained in the boat after being fired if it was a suicide. But again, we don't know the circumstances of how or whatever.
Right.
But the interesting thing is the luminol testing that was done on the boat before, they said they found 0 blood. And she said that the way the wind was, even if it was a slight breeze or anything, that there would have been some splatter on the boat.
Right.
On some level.
Mhm.
And there was just 0 blood that they found.
Right. She said no trace evidence.
Yeah.
And there would have been. Yeah.
And I mean, they did give the boat back to the family too. So unless they cleaned it, which I doubt they would have gone through and like actually cleaned the whole boat. I would assume that the family could have done their own testing if they wanted to, if they didn't think it was thorough enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
I mean, they had that paint, the red paint sample tested. So I would imagine if there's anything else, but again, we go, well, yeah. So yeah, the trace evidence issue aside, because that is kind of the problematic because where was he killed then?
Right.
If he wasn't on the boat. That all of the things she did demonstrated that I think ultimately it could have happened. Like you could theoretically, if A and B and C and D and E and F and all of these things that are all not, any strength at all, conceivably it could have been a suicide. In order for it to have been a suicide, it would have had to have happened this way.
But my thing is, if you're going to kill yourself, why would you anchor your body down to never be found? Like, why not just shoot yourself in the head in the water
and let yourself float?
Right.
Yeah,
like why would you hide your own body? I don't know. That didn't make sense to me either. I mean, there was a lot of things that didn't make sense, but
there's just nothing to it. There's just really nothing to the suicide thing, and there's a lot of stuff that goes against it.
So like Dr. Baker also noticed that there were no scavengers on the body after being in the water for 10 days.
Yeah, 10 days. But see, I don't know. Like, I mean, I obviously I don't know. I don't know what the predation patterns of Southeast Florida or whatever the hell it is that they're at of the fishies in the water, the marine life.
There's sharks, there's alligators, and you would think that the blood, if your like your head is basically, I mean, the amount of blood that you would have lost from a gunshot wound in the head would have drawn like sharks in from everywhere. And the fact that his arms looked completely not touched, like they looked great.
Yeah. When was the boat found in relation to the body being found?
The boat was found like a day after he went missing. And then the body was found 7 days. I'm sorry. Let me see.
So this other theory is that,
I think the body was found like 10 days after.
Okay. So that's a significant amount of time, right? Mm-hmm. So we're ruling out suicide. So the unknown unsolved mystery is what happened to him. Did he kill himself? Did he get killed? I think the evidence shows pretty clearly it wasn't suicide, for a variety of reasons. And then that leaves us with, okay, well, what if it was homicide, given what we know, there's no trace evidence on the boat. His body is not, it wasn't eaten alive by all the animals in the marine life. It was shot in the face. He doesn't have a contact wound. So whatever shot was decent amount away. So, and there's no trace evidence on the boat. If the boat was the murder scene, you really, really got to think that there was going to be trace evidence, blood, tissue, something was going to splatter.
Yeah.
So if you would have think like the first thing, what I was thinking, okay, well, he came across like the journalist says, come across something and saw something he shouldn't have seen.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, see something happening, should have seen some low-level cartel dude just goes and takes a shotgun, shoots him, and then wraps him up, dumps him over the boat. But in that scenario, he would have been shot on the boat, and there would be trace evidence. And then, they took everything. That would answer the other questions. There's no shotgun found after, but no trace evidence of the fact that his body wasn't eaten alive. Or dead, I guess.
Yeah.
That was poor choice of words. You know what I mean? So that, okay, it can't be that. So, well, then in order for those things to be true, he would have to have, so maybe he saw something he shouldn't have seen. They took him because you find the boat like a day later. So the boat is just out there. And where the boat was found is weird. Like, I mean, in comparison, it would have had to go through the bridge camera. But then they take him and like keep him on their boat, and then, which would have had to have been a relatively small boat if it was in that small little river area, and then would take him to a bigger boat for like days and then shoot him and then dump him in the water.
Yeah, it's hard to say.
That would take the murder scene away from the boat, answering the no trace evidence. It would explain the animals not eating him. But that's a that's a kind of that's a story. It's a hell of a story you have to concoct. But
well, you mentioned the drawbridge that he would have gone under. He would have had to have gone under to get out of the channel. Of course, they checked the camera that was there, and there was a corrupted file on top of another corrupted file, apparently. So there was no evidence.
So the file with the footage on it was corrupted.
So we don't know how he ended up through there. And like Pat's friend mentioned, well, maybe the person that murdered him decided to tow the boat out there and just kind of cut it and just let it, float away. Or so
all questions which would have been answered by being able to see it on camera. But so as we know, cameras are, you don't turn on. There are no actual filming in them. Who knows? Listen to a lot. we watch enough true crime to know those cameras, unfortunately.
I know. So if you're listening, go check your cameras and make sure everything's working properly. If you have a Ring, if you have a whatever, just everybody check your cameras.
Those Ring cameras are starting to catch like lots of people, like you're starting to see stuff, all kinds of craziness stuff. And I'm like always wanting to make sure mine is, fully charged.
Yeah, definitely. So let's talk about the person of interest they interviewed.
Oh God, the red herring.
Yes, Damon Crestwood, who was a friend of Pat's brother. He was a chef. He was their neighbor,
longtime friend of the family,
but not so close to Pat. They were acquaintances. I mean, they never said that they like hung out or things like that, that they were just kind of friendly, not super close. So after Pat's disappearance, Damon's behavior became very different. And he became very upset, crying uncontrollably, which no one had ever seen before.
The friend was like, he was disproportionately sad and angry about the loss.
Yeah. And that he would look out into the Manatee River and cry and sob for hours. Now, that's crazy to me, first of all, because
it's a little weird.
It would have to be like a very, very close loved one of mine for me to be crying for hours looking out at a river. I mean, that's just like,
well, given what we believe about the quote unquote afterlife, I mean, we'd be like, see
you in a few years. Yeah.
I know you can still see me. It's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Miles goes on to say that they weren't close, and that was very strange. And every January after Pat's death, Damon would have a mental breakdown, which gave everyone an unsettled feeling.
Yeah.
He admitted to using crystal meth after Pat's death. And this is where he said after Pat's death, he mentioned that he started using crystal meth. We don't know if he started using drugs before Pat died and then it just got worse.
Right.
Or if it really did start after he died, because a lot of people on the internet were talking, of course, the internet's loose, and we're saying, hey, maybe this guy really did have a meth problem. Maybe he was running drugs. Maybe he had something to do with drug dealers in Florida. And that was the connection between Damon and Pat, that maybe they were both out on boats that day. And Pat saw something he wasn't supposed to see.
Saw this friend of his involved in a drug running something.
Yeah.
So maybe not as much of a red herring. I mean, the way they tried to present it is that it like he somehow murdered, because he had a boat that had red paint on it,
Right.
and even though that paint matched like basically generic boat paint that you can buy anywhere.
So yeah, detectives were saying, hey, this is a really popular paint, and the family was saying, no, like this is actually pretty specific. I don't know the details as far as what that means. Like, I don't know what tests were done and how they can test that paint. It would be interesting.
What did they use to draw their conclusions from?
Right. It'd be interesting to find the reports to see how close you can get to, paint brands, companies. I don't know what year of production or what batch it was from. I don't know. I don't know the technology behind that.
Right.
But where it gets even weirder is that they were telling us a story about one Memorial Day weekend. Damon tied a rope around his dog and himself, and it was in the exact manner as the rope was on Pat's body, which made the family feel really uncomfortable. Like, in what universe would you think it's okay to do that in front of a family member whose loved one has been murdered? I'm going to say it, whatever.
Yeah.
Murdered.
Oh, he was absolutely murdered. The question is like how or who or why.
Right. Why would you do that? I don't know. It's just weird. I know drugs are bad, and drugs
are bad, man.
Crystal meth is not good for you. I know that.
Crystal meth makes you paranoid and hallucinate and all kinds of things. God, some of the stories that I've heard in the rooms, 12-step meetings, but
oh my goodness, yeah, I can only imagine.
I hadn't thought about it in terms of this friend being involved in drug running. See, now you can like reverse concoct the story about what would have had to have happened, right? Okay, so he runs into something he shouldn't have seen. Oh, it's this guy. It's this friend of his. Da 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 da. He could have been like and kidnapped him,
right?
Like took him on their boat and kidnapped him and held him alive or dead while he decided what to do, and then ultimately killed him, put him in the water.
The thing that the people on the internet were talking about, Reddit and everywhere else, they were saying that if the drug ring, I'm going to call it whatever, drug cartels, drug ring, lower drug dealers, whoever, depending on how big the drugs in that area are and the drug running, who's to say that the police weren't involved? And that's why they didn't really pursue the murder theory, and we're kind of just like suicide, or just not like whether it be the paint or just like the steps that they took or the corrupted file. Again, I mean, all these things could happen. A corrupted file happens every day, all day long.
Right.
Corrupted files happen. But it was just like their lack of what the family feels was intent on solving a murder mystery. They were kind of just not on top of it.
Yeah, and again, I mean, obviously the family is the one, this is told from the family's point of view. You've had them, is the focal point there. It's obviously going to be favorable to them and what the narrative they're trying to push, right? So if that's how the conclusions that they draw, and I'm not trying to give police officers a pass here, especially not right now, but you don't know what the words that they actually said to them are, and then this is just their interpretation of what they have said, what they're relating to us, what was said. We don't get to actually hear for ourselves what was said, so we have to rely on their interpretation, which is obviously going to be, we still believe that there's something else out there, you know what I mean? So there's a lot of bias that's there, and I don't know, do we believe that, or do we not believe? We don't know what actually was said. We don't know what was transpired.
Yeah, I know if my loved one was murdered in a boat, I would do everything I could, including hiring outside people. But I know exactly what you're saying.
But then at the same time, the police could be completely and absolutely reasonable and speaking to you absolutely reasonably,
right?
But because of your firmly held belief about this, you're going to take what he's saying as, oh, they're not doing enough.
Right.
even if by reasonable person standards.
So let's get into Damon. And
Okay.
so once the red paint was found, okay, well, let's pretend like it wasn't even tested yet, because it wasn't tested until later.
Okay.
So while Damon was alive, he refused to let the police test the red paint. And not only that, he stopped communicating with the police, and the police just kind of let it go. They didn't push it. They didn't.
I don't think they had enough, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
To push it.
Yeah. So I don't know.
Or like you said, didn't care enough to push it that far because
right. So
probably somebody we know.
To me, though, it's a red flag, though, because if you love this person so much and you're crying and mourning them and doing all these things, why would you not want to let the police just take some paint from your boat? That to me doesn't make any sense. If my best friend or my friend went missing and died or murdered, I'd be like, do whatever you need to do.
Do whatever you need to do, which means which gives weight to the theory of he was involved in the drug running and it was his boat, and that paint did transfer from his boat in some kind of collision out there.
Right. And so the investigation then kind of stopped. But on April 5th, 2017, Damon overdosed on possibly meth, is what they said, possibly meth, at 48 years old. So at that point, Damon's daughter, gave permission for the police to then do testing on the boat. And that's when they found that the paint matched. But again, we have so many unanswered questions because Damon's passed, and I think it's interesting that his daughter gave permission after all that time.
Because she said if she felt like it was the right thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So she maybe didn't know that if he was involved, she maybe wasn't not aware of it.
Yeah, I don't know how, like, her story, I don't know how old she was, or, whether she was living there, or even if she knew Pat. But Jill thinks that Damon is aware and knows what happened to Pat. She doesn't say that she thinks he did it, but she thinks she's aware.
Is aware of
what
something
happened to it.
Well, I mean, you could reasonably concoct a story that matches the evidence.
Yeah.
Download Upside and start getting cash back wherever you roll. It's like having your own hype man. Get an average of 17% cash back at restaurants.
Oh, it's dinner time.
Average of 13% on groceries.
Get those groceries.
10 cents per gallon average cash back on gas.
It's go time.
Plus, cash back at participating convenience stores too.
Stacks on stacks.
Users can earn hundreds of dollars a year, 3 times more than other apps.
Upside, show me that money.
All right, we get it. It's easy. Just sign up for the free Upside app and start getting cash back for doing you. Download the free Upside app and use promo code DOYOU10 for an extra $10 cash back on your first purchase of $10 or more. That's promo code DOYOU10 for an extra $10 on the free Upside app. Get cash back for doing you with the free app from Upside.
And that kind of makes more sense than just a random drug runner that he ran into that would have shot him on sight versus holding up. I mean, I know this sounds like straight out of an episode of Ozark, which, oh my God,
that's a great show.
Such a good fucking show. I'm so sad that it's gone. But, I could see this as an episode of Ozark, right? Yeah. Like, wasn't it actually, you got these big boats on the water, and there's all these cartel folks, and then agents of the cartel, and then all, the lawyer lady living out there on the water. Who knows? Yeah. She could have, plenty of people were held hostage in that show.
Someone made a comment online. Well, what if Pat was in his boat and he sees in the distance Damon on his boat and decides to speed up, and then Damon's on a boat with somebody like a bad guy, drug cartel, whatever, drug person, drug dealer, and all of a sudden he rides up and sees something he's not supposed to see, and the other person tells him, get in the boat, like, you know what I mean, and then says that, and that's where the story goes, wherever you want it to go. But that Damon didn't actually do anything to him, but it was Damon who was the connection between Pat and the other person.
That's reasonable. I can see that. I mean, that's another way the story could be written. Absolutely.
So that's where it's like, there's a lot of ways the story can go. At the end of the day, it's definitely murder. I really don't see this being suicide.
The evidence doesn't match. I mean, you could kind of make it match if you squeeze it really hard. Maybe if you squint hard enough, you can see it.
Listen, Katrina, I saw a video the other day online. I don't know if you've seen this, like on Reels on Instagram or whatever, where a dog gets into the golf cart and crashes it into the person's car. It was caught on their security camera. So basically, there's a golf cart crashed into the car, and had it not been recorded, it looked like somebody would have just taken the golf cart and driven it into the car. But it was caught on camera that a dog got into the cart and obviously like pressed down
it loose or whatever.
And just boom, there goes the cart into the truck. My point is that like sometimes
you would not have been able to concoct that story had you not seen it.
Exactly. So sometimes there are things that just happen, that crazy things that you wouldn't expect that actually happen in this world. And you never know. So maybe then the slight chance he did commit it. I don't know. There's just like a lot of things that could have happened.
Yeah, exactly.
But I don't think he was killed on that boat at all. There's no evidence.
Yeah, and unless any of our outside research turned up any questions about stuff that was like swabs that were taken and sent to labs, and they didn't come back to anything or anything like that. And there was like an argument about actual evidence that was tested.
Nope. People were making up stories. Well, maybe he had mechanical trouble or whatever, or something happened and he needed to get on somebody else's boat, or maybe. But I don't think anybody thinks that anything happened on that boat. Everyone thinks it happened. Yeah. Something happened and he got off the boat.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I could totally write the screenplay for that episode though.
Yeah.
That you just described, with he was on the boat with somebody and there's the other person,
And the thing is too, the criminals weren't, or whoever threw him in the water was not smart, because the water was so shallow. And like what we learned about, or we know about bodies and gases after you pass away and bodies floating, that water was not deep enough for that body to have not, for the anchor to have held. Right. So maybe they weren't that experienced if they were going to do it that way. I don't know.
Possibly. I mean, if this other fisherman guy, the commercial fisherman who fishes dead bodies out of the Florida rivers for a living. I mean, apparently this happens frequently.
Yeah.
Accident, suicide, or murder, right? And and I've been listening to the Real Crime Profile podcast guys talking about the Casey Anthony. No, I do this all the time.
You said her name and I got,
No, Peterson, the other coast, Lacey not the Florida. Lacey Peterson. And they've been talking about this case in detail, because they're going over like every single piece of evidence, because it was big in the news, and there was a hearing to see if he's going to get a new trial based only on a technicality issue, not on any evidentiary issue. But anyway, they've been taking apart, dismantling the evidence really, really carefully with all of their years of experience and know-how and stuff. And one of the episodes focuses on like their autopsies of Connor and Lacey. And I have learned so much. Like, they have this guy on there who was there, who's like, he's at the FBI, and his expertise is like rescue water, diving, evidentiary, like crime scene tech guy for underwater bodies. Yeah. Like that's his expertise. Right. And he and his team handle everything like west of the Mississippi. There's like a team on the East Coast and a team on the West Coast. And there are these like super specialized crime scene tech diver guys that it'd be
interesting to get their perspective on this case,
right? And that's what I'm thinking, because they have like analyzed every little piece, and they explain all of this stuff. That's where I learned what perdition was, which is the animals munching on you and all those things that happen. And they're explaining all of this the deep water and the gases, and the way her womb looked, how the baby had been released from the womb, wasn't because, there's all these conspiracy theories that the baby, they kept Lacey alive, let her give birth, and dump both of them or something. All these other, you guys, Scott Peterson did it. There's no
100%.
There's no question about it. And if you don't believe me, go listen to like the 6 episodes. They're short episodes. They're not very long. On Real Crime Profile, not an ad, Real Crime Profile. Looking at these people are experts. They know what they're doing. They'll explain it all and break it all down into detail. But that's like, all of this stuff is going through my head. I'm like, I wonder what the analysis would be on that, as they were going through all these things. Well, you look at this and you look at this and you look at that, and this is why that expert's testimony would bunk, and this is why this podcaster's testimony was bunk, or whatever it is. They couldn't be that way because and so anyway.
I think my opinion is he saw something he wasn't supposed to see. They took him on the boat. Whoever the third person was decided to maybe hold him, I don't want to say hostage, but take him somewhere else, maybe on land somewhere, and then decide what they're going to do with him, and then decided he can't be a witness to whatever, and then murdered him and threw him in the bay. But the thing is, he had his anchor from his boat. I don't know. There's a lot to think about, but I don't know. I feel like there was at least 2 other people. I feel like his friend Damon and at least one other person, if not more, were involved.
Yeah, I feel like that. Yeah, for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then at the end, they interviewed Jill, and they show her putting up flyers. She says annually she puts up flyers about the case, and that she said that Pat would have hated it. He didn't like attention. He wouldn't want that. But which I think says a lot about his personality. He was probably like very low key.
Yeah.
Chill dude.
He's just that dude listening to the Grateful Dead in the backyard, or classical music. He probably has classical music on.
Yeah. Or Jimmy Buffett. They're in Florida. I don't know. Maybe Margaritaville. Maybe not. But maybe he's a parrot head.
Who knows?
But I don't know. This was just really a good case for me. I really liked this one. And I really hope the family gets answers, but I don't see them.
I don't think that there's enough any kind of leads enough to be able to find.
No, unless Damon and his drug induced decided to like tell people,
confess
some people, right?
Yeah. Because
really
whatever
happened.
cartel guys that he was working with, if that's the case, they're not going to come forward.
No.
No.
I don't know. I feel like people do know stuff. There are people out there that probably know.
Somebody knows something.
Yeah.
Always, right? Like, and like they say, if you guys have any tips, if you know anything, go to unsolved.com, submit a tip.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's Unsolved Mysteries.
Yes. And then next week is a ghost one.
The Ghost of Department 14.
Yes.
I'm excited for that one.
Me too.
A friend of mine was like, have you guys done that episode yet? Oh my God, you have to let me know when you do, because oh my God. I'm like, okay, I'll let you know.
Definitely. I saw that episode once. I can't wait to rewatch it. For sure.
I have not watched it yet.
Oh, gotcha.
I'm saving it. Anyway, I think that's all we got. That's all we got for you today. Yeah.
Let us know what you think.
Let us know what you think. If you like us, please leave us a 5-star review. And some nice words would be nice as well. Also, tell your friends about us. Make sure you subscribe, follow the show, all those kinds of things. If you like us, please share us. That helps us a lot too. Helps other people like-minded find us. If you want to join us to talk about any of these cases, or any of our favorite trash reality shows, you can join our Facebook group. That all of those will be linked in the show notes. And check out the fraudcast.com for merch. What, sweetie?
Somebody posted on the Facebook group that they wanted more the Gypsy show. I was like, we mentioned it in the last episode about the gypsies. What is it?
Oh,
the,
my big fat American gypsy wedding.
Yeah, somebody said they wanted more of that. So I was like,
all right.
I didn't respond, but I'm like, we could do that. Probably.
We could do that. All right. Yeah. You know what we could talk about I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I'm
we
down.
could find some of the classic episodes, the crazy episodes. They ended up building a whole spin-off series, Gypsy Sisters.
Oh, really?
Based on one of the families. Yeah. There's one episode I remember that the girl was like in love with her cousin, but she was set to marry somebody else. And
dear God.
Oh yeah, it was fantastic. And then she like married the guy that she was supposed to marry. But then after this whole episode about I can't decide who I love more. But then like I think she married the guy, but then ended up running off with the cousin. Anyway.
What?
Yeah.
I have a lot to watch.
Yeah. I'll find you some episodes. I'll send you some links.
Yes, please do. I'm down.
I did not see these comments on the Facebook group, so I need to go look at those. But let us know. Join us over there. Let us know. Talk to us. Lexi's all about talking to people on Facebook.
I am as of today. I'm excited to answer your question.
Somebody go talk with Lexi over there. So she's not talking to herself. No, you do that anyway.
I do. Yes.
All right. It's way past my bedtime, kids. I'm going to go to bed. Good night, all.
Good night.